I am super excited to welcome everybody to another episode of Breaking Through the Cloud. I'm thrilled to have an incredible guest here on today. Ruth McElroy is Global IT Senior Director, Strategy and Transformation at Boston Consulting Group, commonly known as BCG. Ruth is a proven leader with a track record of driving results, building high-performing teams, and, in my opinion, simplifying the complex. Ruth has held prominent leadership roles across finance and technology, but I'm really excited today to welcome her on to dive deep into her career, the different turning points, and how she ended up in such an important and, in my opinion, a complex role today, and how she has navigated the different corporate waters and what that looks like. So I'd like to give, a warm welcome to Ruth. Ruth, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're very busy. And just to get started, I think it would be great to give the audience, I assume everybody listening knows BCG, but for those that don't, I think just giving a high level, who is BCG, and then a little context around your role there today, and then we can really dive in.
Sure. Well, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for thinking of me for this. It's a really cool experience and to get to talk to you and learn from you as well. So BCG is a global management consulting firm. We operate, I think, out of over 90 offices. We've got a workforce of over 30,000, and we really partner with businesses and governments and across industries to solve their most complex problems. So we see that as a privilege to be able to partner with our clients and think about things. And then my role within BCG, I work in our global services team, which is kind of the group that sits across our offices and really empowers kind of our consulting community. Within global services sits finance and HR and operations and IT. And so my role is really about how we provide the digital capabilities that our firm needs to continue to serve our clients well. And particularly, my role within the strategy and transformation space is, in an IT perspective, making sure that we have set our strategy. We are transforming ourselves towards, our goal of being a best-in-class organization, that our operating model supports that we're building a connected culture, and we have the tools and platforms that we need to operate. And so it's a pretty diverse role in that way. And I get to partner with a ton of people on our leadership team and within our groups to really make that happen. Cloud being one of our major ambitions, moving 100% to the cloud. So getting to partner on this transformation has been really fun, and others. But yeah, and I've been at BCG, I guess, for about almost 8 years now.
I think one thing that is so fascinating to me that you just touched on is the cross collaboration that is required. So not only are you a part of setting strategy, but also getting alignment to set strategy. And one of my favorite quotes is, success is 1% vision and 99% alignment.
Yes.
Just curious if you share that feeling and kind of what you think has led you to be good at this role and to enjoy it, because that's one sense I've got from you, that you really are great at what you do and that you like it, which is not the case for everybody.
I do love my role. I was just talking about it last week with my boss, and just how kind of excited I am about the change that we're embarking on, and how I really have such a privilege of working across the organization and teams. I think what I like about it is it's dynamic, it's challenging, it's never the same. And then, as you said, that partnership and collaboration really comes at the forefront. So I get to work with really interesting people who are usually smarter than me, and we get to partner together on how do we solve these things and how do we think about it. I think the BCG culture, and one thing I really appreciate it, is we are a collaborative culture by nature. And what that means for us is that while we lead with opinion, we are ever testing our hypothesis and thinking. And I remember on one of our there was like a consulting boot camp that I attended, and it was, every day when you start a case, you form an opinion on day one about what the final answer is, and you prove or disprove yourself every day. And you do that through listening and learning data, opinions, you rationalize that every day. And I really carry that forward to say, I'm going to lead with an opinion here, but I'm thrilled to be wrong if it means we get to a better answer. And really coming with that genuine posture, I think, is not just me, but I think the whole team around me approaches work in that way. And so that is a really exciting environment to be part of.
I love that. I always say if you're the smartest person in any room, you should immediately leave that room. And I think to your point, just getting to be around people that you feel like push you and you learn from is really rewarding. I feel the same way. So I'm going to ask you to take me back a little bit. I'm wondering if a young Ruth dreamt of ending up in the role that she's in, and give me a sense of what your, vision was for your career and how it moved through, whether in school and just important points along the way.
Sure. So, I don't always say this, but I'll be transparent with you. I didn't really have a vision for my career when I started out. I wasn't one of those people who started and said, I want to do this or be this. I feel like my career has been a bit of hard work and partnering with people and having actually people who believed in me more than I believed in myself. And kind of they really encouraged and coached me to get outside my comfort zone, to take risks, to keep kind of growing and learning. And that took a bit at the beginning of my career to really think about. But I mean, in undergrad, I thought I wanted to be a marketing major. I started in that and then kind of shifted. At my MBA, I focused a little bit more on finance. So I think coming out of the MBA program, after a few years of work experience under my belt, I took my first finance role. And I liked that a lot. I liked how it was fairly fact-based, but it wasn't as dynamic as, at least in that the role, the organization I was in, as I would like for it to be. And one of my MBA professors actually recommended me for a different role in a different company, and it was a med tech company. And so that's where the blend of technology and finance started to come through. And I became an account manager within that company. And then I dipped into consulting after that. And then actually got to consult for BCG in a role. And then when I came to BCG, took kind of the strategy and transformation, not the role that I'm in today, but within kind of the program management space. And so it was a little bit of a windy road where one thing kind of brought out the strengths and what I was good at in a way that I didn't see. And I kind of leaned that way. And I have continued to do that. And what I've been thankful for is I feel like people have really put me in a position that I didn't think I was ready for. And it was a bit of a sink or swim. And I almost always swam, which was nice. But had I not had those people kind of pulling me forward, I probably would have never taken the risk that I did in certain spots.
I can relate to you a lot. In that context, I will tell you, people have often asked me the same question, and I did not have any. And ultimately, I also, too, felt like anytime I took a new role, I was woefully not ready for it and in over my skis. And I think in a way that has pushed me. I'm guessing you probably have a little bit of the same with that.
Totally. And I'm thankful for it now. And I have to keep, even now, though, I have to remind myself, I still find myself in those moments where I'm like, where you question yourself, like, is this too big, or is this right? Can I do this? And I have to lean back on that muscle memory and be like, no, this is not the first time I felt this way. I just need to figure it out. I need to apply those same principles I've done over and over again in my career and keep kind of learning and growing. So, but you forget. So I don't know if you feel this way, but I forget sometimes and have to remind myself of myself.
I think when you have a highly complex role with a lot of different pieces and parts to it, things that you have to bring together can feel overwhelming. And when you're like, okay, I always say go back to the fundamentals, the basics, simplify things. And I think that that's the key when you feel that way. But yes, 100%. I feel that at least once a week. And honestly, I actually get more scared when I don't feel that, if that makes sense, because it's almost a sense of pushing yourself and getting better. And that point that you said about the way that BCG thinks about customers and those engagements of always questioning, like, are we on the right path? Is our hypothesis right? Do we need to pivot? Did we get data that we didn't have before? And so I feel the same way, kind of from a career standpoint of pushing yourself in that capacity.
I'm interested in your take on this. I can lean towards that mindset most of the time. Sometimes I get tired and I, have a harder time with it. But sometimes I find that not every, especially in a global organization, of course, not everyone's going to be in that headspace. And even within my, core team that I work with, then not everyone's in that headspace. How do you calibrate that with kind of not just your perspective, but the needs of the organization and those around you? How do you think about that?
That's a great question. I think for me, one thing that is super important is kind of those key measures of success, because I do think aligning on the measuring what matters and being able to bring back people to that level of accountability. And when you start to see things not add up or we aren't hitting certain metrics, I think it's much easier to say, listen, what we thought might not be correct, because if it was correct, we would be seeing the results and we'd be driving what we need to see. But generally speaking, I would say I'm probably one of the most paranoid and or at times anxious people. And I have to temper that, frankly. Like, for instance, I was just on our team meeting and kind of talking about the state of the economy and what's going on and the impact, and everybody's feeling it. I'm sure BCG has a ton of insights. I've even been on meetings where you've had different economists from BCG talking about what they're seeing, both macro and micro. And I think that that's always really helpful. But you have to temper that, I think, because it's that balance of fear and angst versus what's productive and what's really helping you move the ball forward. But I also think one-on-ones with team, like there's certain things that I just won't ever shift. And those are things that I find to be non-negotiable, of like those meaningful touch points, because it's how I build the connective tissue, and I can kind of gauge the sense of like, are we on the same page? Have we drifted off course? If we have, why have we? Mm-hmm. Without that, I really struggle. I don't think every leader is like that though, but for me, that's what I needed. And I'm curious about how you manage that, because you not only have your team, but you've got like the cross-functional team. It's quite robust for you.
Yeah. I mean, I have to really challenge myself to keep a pulse on how others are feeling, especially those that aren't proximate to me, that are largely impacted by some of the change that we're driving. And just finding ways to be in listening mode or really paying attention to some of the things. Because a lot of times I don't hear them directly, but I will hear whispers or questions that are asked in a way that implies something. And it's like, oh, that was really helpful insight for me to understand the change that I'm driving and how it impacts others. But making sure you have those listening channels, I think, is so important for me to then calibrate. Like, yes, even though I have the appetite for this or think this is the right thing to do, it's not going to be effective at this point in time or in this way. So I really have to adjust there. But yeah, I think it's hard.
I agree with you though. I like that rule of 3. Like when I hear the same whisper 3 times, I'm like, okay, there's something here, like things that are behind the scenes, because ultimately I think people will tell you something and then not always tell you the whole thing. And I feel like that's why the trust piece in leadership is so important, and being able to drive that cross-functionally so you get that real data point.
Right.
There was one thing that you said that I wanted to come back to, and you said you had leaders that saw something in you that you didn't necessarily see in yourself.
Sure.
I'm curious about what that actually looked like. Was it a leader recognizing what you were doing, the results you were driving, holding up a mirror? Like, what did that look like for you?
So I'll give a couple examples. At least one comes to mind, which was really terrifying. So, I was a financial analyst in early days, and I supported kind of the account management team for this med tech company that I mentioned. And I remember one of the account managers was really like, I want you to be in front of the clients. I don't want you to be, I think you could really do well here. And I was like, not at all up for that challenge, but he literally took me with him. And I shadowed once, and then I did the presentation the next client meeting to a group of, it was doctors and nurses, people, and I'm in my 20s. I'm from the South. My accent was much thicker at the time. And I was presenting to a hospital system that was in the Northeast. And so I'm young, in my 20s. I'm a woman. I have the Southern accent. And I just remember being like, this is not going to work out. And he did not care my opinion in that way, in a very respectful way. He was like, no, you got this. Like, I prepared you for this. You watched me do it. You know your stuff. Just start. And it was probably not the best, but he was such a good champion of me to say, I'm going to take this risk. It's okay if it's not perfect. We'll talk about it afterwards, and just kind of threw me in the deep end. And I really didn't think I don't at the time think I could have said no. I probably could have, but it didn't cross my mind, because I am quite competitive with myself in that way. So I always do it. And, and then from there, I did them. I think I did them from then on out for certain clients. Like, it was like, that was the moment and it was great. But I just remember feeling so not equipped, and him being such an advocate for me. And then that was really my first shift towards client facing work. And I really did love it, because I loved kind of hearing and learning and understanding the problems in a more concrete way versus just what the data was telling me in the background. And when that came, I think, a whole new opportunity for me. But I didn't know I wanted to be in a client facing role. Like, that wasn't, again, my aspiration, but he saw that in me, that I'd be good in that, and really put me, gave me a seat at the table, basically.
Do you find yourself doing the same now for other people around you?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And I really empathize when people feel, when they come to me and I can sense the nervousness, or and how do I ground them in the right headspace to be successful? Because I think so much of what I've experienced, I don't want to project on anyone, but what I've experienced and what I see in those around me is just getting in the headspace of success and confidence goes so far to tackling challenges with a clear head. Versus if you get in your own way, you really won't do your best work, and you need to when you need to rise to a challenge. And so how can I both give people the opportunity and help set their headspace in the right spot to be successful?
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that approach, I imagine, has provided quite a few people on your team some solace and confidence. And I think that's the biggest thing that I have found too, of just, it's that fear of failure. And once you tell people, guess what, you can't fail, like I think it releases some of that angst. Like, the worst thing you can imagine, by the way, isn't going to happen. But even if it did, you're going to wake up tomorrow and be okay. That's right. No. So I laugh because I've had the pleasure of getting to talk to some amazing women, and I find that the failures are a little bit more acutely remembered than the successes. So I'm curious if you have any points in time in your career that either felt like a failure or a setback. What were they and how you navigated them? Because I do feel like often people tune in to listen when they're going through something, whether it be change, transition, or potentially a setback in their career.
So, as reflecting on this question, I'm probably going to give a bit of a non-traditional answer. I don't think I've ever flat out failed at anything. And I try to check myself on that. I'm like, is that true? Like, not be true. I don't think that I have. I've certainly had moments of greater success than others. But I think there's actually times in my career where I feel like I've been inauthentic to myself. And in that, it felt like the wrong move for me, where I took on a big project that I didn't want, but was challenging and looked good, caused me to kind of find an imbalance personally. And I took that on. And for me, while that felt like success professionally, it set me on the wrong course. And so it's moments when I think back on my career, it's moments like that I actually find to be the biggest personal failure, because I went in a direction that was inauthentic. And so I think that's probably not what you were looking for in that question.
It's actually better, because I think that, for what it's worth, I always struggle with this question, because I also think the way that society views failure is very specific. But to your point, I think failures do not just have to be in the professional remit, and for you to be able to look back on that and see what the impact was is super powerful. Yeah. I love that answer. Do you remember, was there a time when you realized, and then what did you do of okay, this goes against kind of what I need in my life and or balance, career, whatever it might be?
I knew it from the beginning, actually. Yeah. I remember stepping into it and taking it on and being like, this is not probably right, but I'm going to do it anyway. And so it was a gut check. And I eventually got out of that, right? I was more honest with who I was working for at the time, and kind of worked my way out of that, and eventually left the team at the right time. But yeah, it took a lot of unwinding, right? And it's harder. And I found I was at a women's conference earlier this year, and one of the things that it stated that it really resonated with me was talking about burnout and where we feel like, how can you avoid that? And it was talking about how really understanding your values and your purpose, like what are your core values, and how can you align everything you do to those, both in your career and your personal life. When you do that, you feel energized, versus when you are outside of that alignment is where you start to feel that burnout or tension. And I was like, that is so true. Because I remember at that time of my life, I was totally out of whack. I was so burned out. It wasn't right, but my accomplishments looked great. And so, but it was just a bad moment for me. And now that I've heard that and kind of can think about that, I check myself when I find those tense moments. I'm like, what am I doing that's out of alignment? And what are not major life decisions I can make, but maybe those smaller life decisions that I can bring it closer. What's within my control to bring it closer? And it's been so helpful for me just mentally being able to approach kind of home and work and all the things in a better way.
That's one of the questions that I had for you. And I think you just answered it. One of the things that I hate is whenever I'm on a panel or I'm being interviewed for a women's group or a tech group, they ask, like, how do you do it all? And to be very clear, I do not do it all. Like, I just do not. So I have a very amazing partner at home, and we have like a good balance of kind of but also it's not always consistent. And I think there's times where it's like I carry more at home. There's times where he carries more at home. And I feel like what I always search for is kind of that harmony rather than balance of like nothing feels too out of whack. But I even find myself like that's still very difficult. Yeah. And I think the older I get, my parents are getting older, like how you manage that kind of being an additional piece. I'm like, in addition to what you said, are there any other things that you just have implemented in being able to keep that alignment, if you will?
Sure. And I mean, just for context, I think it is important. I have a 3 and a 6-year-old. So I am early on in my family journey. I have young kids at home. And I love these ages. My husband jokes with me because every year I'm like, it's just the best age. He's like, right, you said that last year. Yeah. But I think the harmony word really resonated with me, and I don't do it all. I think the boundaries piece is so critical. Two things. One is setting really firm boundaries, both at home and at work where I can, and being willing to flex those as it makes sense. I feel like so much of my life right now is very seasonal. I'm stepping into summer here in Atlanta, which means just home looks very different in the summer because of schools. And then, at work, the fall is always incredibly busy. And so I have to always keep perspective that says this is literally a season and there's going to be different challenges at everyone. And then, setting really firm boundaries, I find that I do have to mentally say, I'm not going to do calls after this time unless there's an exceptional case, or I am also going to wholly outsource certain parts of the day to my husband and trust that he can do that. Like, I have a very supportive partner who I can do that. That's a place of privilege, and just trust that he's going to do it and get out of the headspace of trying to manage that. Right. And so I feel like for me, it's both setting my own mental boundaries at work, and also just being flexible to say, on the scale, we're doing great. Today was a bad day, and that's okay. Right. And just accepting that not every day is going to be good and not being discouraged by it is, I guess, my biggest pieces of advice. But I'm still learning too. I mean, I think everyone, I don't know where you feel, but people ask that question. I'm like, I don't know. This is what I know so far, but I'm sure ask me 5 years ago, it's very different.
I have a 6-year-old, so I just have one. And frankly, it's funny because I just had one because that's all I can handle. And it's, society hates when you have one kid, by the way. Like, one of the first questions I always get asked, like, when are you going to have another? Even now, he's 6, about to be 7 in a month. And people are like, you're going to have another one? I'm like, no. So for me, I think it is the week by week, by the way. And the seasonal piece really resonates with me, and being able to know that you're going to have to adjust certain things that, by the way, you've gotten used to within fall and winter that will have to change. And frankly, we see that in our customer base as well. And that's the thing that I always encourage everybody to remember is every single person we engage with is a person that has a whole life outside of what we're talking about. in the context that we've worked with you in BCG, every single person we work with has a life outside of the project and the work that we're being held accountable to completing. And I think often we forget that. So having just empathy and understanding and patience, and we're in the people business, and like we don't manufacture a product. We build teams and we help customers really work on really complex work streams. And there's all these different pieces of running a business like that you have to consider. I feel like being a mom has made me more understanding though, and empathetic in that context of not just like other moms, but just other people and how they're handling all of the things, whether it's an ailing parent or a sibling, like you don't know. So I assume yeah.
Yeah, I think that, and also for me, having the personal courage to show up with that, like in a very real way. Like, I have 2 kids. You should know that. You should know my personal boundaries. And so people can, like you said, I am more empathetic to people, but I also have to give them the opportunity to be empathetic towards me as well. And that has been really hard for me to actually be honest about that in a way that doesn't discount the value that I provide, but it does give people the opportunity to let me show up in whatever way that is. And I want others to do the same. So it's funny, my coach was like, you are seeking, you want to do that for other people, but what I just heard you say is not allowing them to do that for you. Why is that? I'm like, oh gosh, I never thought about that. Like, but I remember coming back from maternity leave both times probably, and like not wanting to pretend like I didn't have a kid. Like I wanted to show up in a way like nothing happened, and it was like, no, I would never want someone on my team to do that. But in my head, that's what I needed to do to be successful. And it's just so funny how I give credit to others that I don't always allow for myself.
Yeah, we are truly the hardest on ourselves. I have always just kind of gone, anytime I get a new boss, I give them permission to give me unfettered feedback and know that I am not going to take it personally, because whatever they're telling me, it's most likely I've already said something meaner to myself about whatever I did. And frankly, it's crazy. I laugh and I'm like, it's bad, but I just who I am. And it's one of those things I'm like, I always think about that. And I'm never as hard on anybody else as I am on myself. So I think just keeping that in check is super important, specifically as you get more and more responsibility at work. And you've moved up and you've had bigger teams and more agreement. And I think when you take on more responsibility, resetting those things is super important.
I love that.
So I'm curious, just given kind of how you've transitioned and learning a little bit more context, do you feel like you've had specific like coaches, advocates throughout your career? And when you think about those people, like, are there really key takeaways that you remember getting from them that you've implemented in addition to what you've already shared? I'd be curious about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So BCG actually is great. They believe in coaching and mentorship very, as you would imagine, they would in a very real way. And so they actually offer formal confidential coaching that's in-house at BCG. And I benefited from that when I stepped into my current cohort level. So after my last promotion, so that is one, I'll touch on that. And then I feel like those who have invested in me most are really, I've had the privilege of some really amazing managers, and particularly at BCG. And they've really, I think one thing that I appreciate about it is they really look for what is the next thing for Ruth, or anyone, not just me, but anyone. Where do we see her? What does she want to do? And where do we see her potential? And how do we really challenge ourselves to give her opportunity to get there? And that comes with, as you're saying, fairly honest conversations about the gap of where you are today and that next thing, right? And so but giving people the opportunity to work on that. They gave me the opportunity to work on that and see that. And I think at times we can approach feedback as, mean-spirited, or we can think of it as an opportunity to allow the person to grow. And so, so I try and think of that for my team and for myself as this is insight for me to grow. I can do with it what I want. I can take it or not. I should take it. And I feel like I've had a lot of managers who have done that. And then from a coaching perspective, I think it was a lot around gaining personal courage and setting a vision for what I want. And I think that's where the two things that I struggled with was how can I define what that good looks like for me and go after that and feel like the permission to do that, but really anchoring to what does that mean for you, like with more specificity and thoughtfulness that I had probably put into it previously. So that was a really important coaching moment. And then again, being true to myself and allowing people to respond to me, to my authentic self and say, because I would challenge myself, I don't want to bother them with that. Well, no, they can take it as a bother, but it's for you. It's important for you to be successful. You need to do that. And so really building my personal courage was an important coaching moment for me. But yeah, that's a little bit. What about you?
I like the point that you just made about the vision for what you want with like specificity. I think is the most important thing that I have found in career path, like the willingness to sit down and think about what you really want is shockingly low, I think, across just companies in general, because people get so invested in what's right in front of them. And I think they also think about this notion of like standard kind of ladder climbing. Those are always the things that I work to challenge people on, because I have found myself in my career at one point just kind of like, oh, okay, promotion, next role. And then I looked around and I had a very big job, a lot of people in my organization, a very large, revenue, gross margin number I was responsible for, and I was not happy. And by the way, I don't think happiness is what I was after, but I wasn't feeling pushed or excited or challenged or any of the things. It was a feeling of discontent, if that makes sense, and wanting something else. And I went externally and got a coach and did like a whole 360, and that was it. It was like, what are the things that you are actually empowered, enlivened by, engaged, excited to do, scared of? That's the other thing of like the things that you're like, oh, that's kind of scary, is another indicator of like potential, like, oh, why are you scared of that? Like maybe it's something you should go do or try. And I have people reach out to me from former companies that are like, want to talk about, and I'm like, what do you want to, and what do you like? What do you not like? When you have a great day, why was it a great day? When you had a bad day, why was it a bad day? And I'm like, I feel like without coaching, I would not have been clear on those things without it.
It's funny you say that. We do kind of quarterly check-ins with your team. And I did as part of my quarterly check-in with my direct reports, that was one of 3 stay interview questions that I had at the end. And it was, what makes your day, what's an exciting day look like for you? Where do you get the most excitement, and what can we do to maximize on those opportunities? It was the most revealing answer, I think, of everything we talked about in the check-ins. And it helped me really, it's so revealing about people. And it's such an easy thing for me to start to lean towards for that person. If I know that, I can help you so much have a better day, or I can avoid those moments that are hard for you, if at all possible. And so how did you work your way out of that moment then in your career?
I think for me, it was like very clearly being aligned to one of the things that I get the most just excitement and pleasure and fun out of is results and impact. And I always like the further you get from a customer, the worse it gets. And I think you can be a CEO of a company and make time to be close to a customer. And I think I had realized that I had gone up and up and up and had lost touch with the thing that I loved, which was learning, driving impact, seeing results, being really in tune with what was going on and the way that the organization had grown and evolved. And the thing that clicked is I just got really clear, like I wanted more impact and to be closer to the customer, which is why I ended up taking a role that I was able to do those things. Smaller organization, smaller remit, more strategic work streams with customers too. I think that was part of it. The work that you all are going through in terms of this transformation. And to me, what I see you all doing is, listen, for us to be able to consult organizations around the globe, we have to be thoughtful about what we're doing internally and how we do the same thing. And I actually do not think that that's super easy to do. I think that that takes a lot of work. And in the same way we're talking about like how people are being thoughtful about like what we need to be doing to be the best leaders and to move forward, I think companies have to do the same thing, which is always, I've admired BCG in that regard, because I know it's not easy, because you all are really helping the most strategic organizations around the world cross these big chasms into the digital age, especially what's going on right now, I think is.
You're right. I think you're right. And our motivation towards the cloud, so it's been super fun to partner with Caylent on that. Our momentum there is really for the speed and innovation benefits that we're finding. Like we have to move as quickly as our clients need us to move. And we have a workforce that is so dynamic and expects a lot. And so we need to give them both the features and products that they need to be collaborative, to serve their clients, to bring insights to life. Those are so critical, and we can't lag on that. And then also we have products, with BCGX that we actually build for clients in the cloud. And so how do we really use the cloud as the platform to be able to do that? And it's been a fun journey though, in both how can we be referenceable to our clients? So when they ask, what are you doing? We can be honest. Not that we would ever not be honest, but we can like lead with that and say, oh yeah, we're doing it. And this is how we did it. And we love those opportunities. And then also, to really have a top-down kind of vision to say, this is a non-negotiable for us. We're getting out of our data centers. And there's cost benefit to it, which is a bonus, but it's really because we need to be able to serve our employee and our customers' needs in a really meaningful way. And we think this is a key enabler of that. So it's been really fun.
I love that. I think the point around the speed of innovation and keeping up with that, it seems to me right now, area that customers are really having to balance a couple of different things. So the speed of innovation, but also being conscious of cost of innovation and being mindful of each. I'm curious, as you think about kind of the next 6 months, 12 months, the things that you're most excited about, because I think right now there's a lot of kind of fear, uncertainty, and doubt from what I'm seeing kind of in the ecosystem. I've loved seeing the Gen AI and everything going on in that space, because it's where I'm seeing people get excited again versus seeing so many things about constriction and optimization and efficiency, which are important, but not losing sight of innovation. I'm curious of just BCGs and your perspective on what you're excited about over the next year.
So I think you hit, like, AI is so a buzz right now, which is great. And it's such a, man, think about a time to learn and really start to adapt. This feels like a really important moment, but I'm sure this is just the first of so many that we need to think about. But I think, moving to the cloud, get just faster time to value. I feel like for those teams that we see are cloud native, we are seeing so much faster time to value for them. And that really excites me. And the AI and automation space is really powerful. We're just stepping into that in so many ways. And we have the benefit of experts at BCG who advise on that. Ethical AI is one of our major topics. So we really have the benefit of kind of bringing that in-house and maximizing on that insight, but then thinking about the use cases that are going to be most impactful for our consultants, and then how we transform our digital kind of operating model to adjust to those and adapt so that we can go even faster. And so I think it's something that we're dedicating a lot of time and capacity into thinking about that, thinking ahead, but it's such an emerging space. This really becomes the time to test and see and be flexible and allow the time, and again, be okay to fail. It's like one of those times where we're going to step into this and we're going to try it, and we might be right, we might be wrong, and that's okay. But I think it can offer, embracing that uncertainty, both because of the economy and because there's so much emerging tech right now, is somewhere you really have to be okay with. And I think we're pushing ourselves to just embrace that right now and use it as a time. BCG in times of uncertainty, I love our culture. It's like you invest. That's where you double down. And that is, our company is leading in that way internally. And I see that within our leadership, and it is so refreshing. And I'm sure a lot of people can't do that, but that's what we're doing, is like, this is the time to invest, right? And really think about how we can set the foot, set us off differently in the future.
I would say that I have seen just through reading books, looking at all these different case studies, businesses that drive success in tough economic climates, and that's the key. And to your point, it is a privilege to be at a certain scale to be able to do that. But at that end of the day, I think just the sheer amount of data and customers that you're working with, just being able to really understand the playing field and what's possible is what's exciting to me. Because there is so much that is unknown right now. And I think the next 6 months are going to be really wild in a cool way. So I'm excited just to watch. And I think the expertise that BCG brings to the table, a lot of customers are searching and yearning for that right now, which is a good space to be in. I am going to attempt to land the plane, if you will. And I think one thing that is interesting, and we've got women that come in and listen to these sessions and ask questions internally and externally, is getting a sense of what your thoughts are around diversity, equity, inclusion, what, BCG is doing, but also like how you are thoughtful about that at a leadership level, because I don't think it's just top down. I think it has to be bottoms up as well within an organization, because it's such an important topic.
I have so many thoughts on this, so this might be a long landing here.
All right, we're not in time constraint, but I'm genuinely curious.
I think this is an area where I've really put focus this year, because we heard what I see as an opportunity. It's a bit of a passion of mine, just given my experience on it. And then I also attended BCG taps into something called the Groundwater Institute and brings kind of their thinking, allows us to really think about that. And that's around racial equity in, mainly the US. So we're a very global organization. So this is something that centers usually in the US, but it's really about how you build the whole groundwater concept. And I think it applies to many groups. Is when you see a fish in a pond who's died, you look at the fish and you wonder what's wrong with that fish. And then when you start to see many fish not thriving in a pond, you say, what's wrong with the pond? What's wrong with the water? And so I think it goes the same way when you think about maybe underprivileged groups. You don't question the individual, you question what's in the water and what systemically can we start to think about and change that could give them a more successful experience. And so that really opened my mind. That groundwater really dives into the racial piece of it, which was really eye-opening for me and an incredibly challenging thing to walk through, but so helpful. And I really do see things differently in that way. And then as it relates to gender diversity, within tech, it's just, the facts are the facts. There are not as much representation for women, especially at your level, within tech. And so how can we think about that? That's a challenge to solve, at least for me. How do we increase representation? How do we think about providing them coaching and opportunities to help level the playing field? And how do we ensure that systemically we're not unintentionally doing things that's going to cause them a challenge? And so within my role in our leadership team, I get to look at all three of those things and really think about how do we tackle each one. And we have a very supportive leadership team in that way. While mostly men, they are very invested in thinking about allyship and looking themselves in the mirror and taking reverse mentoring and thinking about, are there things that I don't know that I'm doing that might be impacting those around me, and so they're in very much like learning mode, which is so nice, and want to hear about the experiences. And we have a commitment on our recruiting pipeline and how we really think about putting intentionality to that. And then also a really invested coaching program and mentorship program and training program for those who want it, who are women within our digital organization. And so we've kind of tried to tackle this a few different ways. And I'm one of the co-sponsors of that. And I've really loved seeing the energy around it. And it's where people start to just really lean in because they want to do the right thing. And I think that's something that I've been so just thankful for, is when you give people the opportunity to do the right thing and help them see if they want to, and they do, it's just how do you start to help them get there. And so it's been really helpful for me.
I love that. I have not heard of the Groundwater Institute. That's fascinating. And the fact that BCG is investing in sending people through that program to learn, I think is very meaningful. I know that those things take time and money, and the fact that they've said, listen, this is important And to your point, the systemic pieces of it are not something that changes overnight. It's that actual processes and the different kind of pillars within organizations. You aren't always thoughtful about what that looks and feels like to underrepresented groups. So I think that's amazing. You mentioned something that I'm fascinated by, and I know there's a lot of companies that have started doing this, the reverse mentoring. So can you give some context on that? Because I'm not sure everybody in the audience would know, but I think it's amazing.
Sure. So it's my co-sponsor who is a man. He started to really think about allyship and what that could mean. And for him, it was interesting because I think he stepped into it with a little bit of like, probably like we would, like, do I know enough about this? Can I be effective in this? Like, there's a little bit of risk there. He was like, I don't know if I'm a good ally. What if I'm not? Can I do? And so one of the things we talked, we listen and learn and tried to think about what other companies were doing and how people tackle this. And reverse mentoring was one of the things that was really helpful, where you actually pair a more senior person with someone who's more junior or maybe underprivileged and allow them to learn from that. And so I think we've seen a couple people who have started to do this, and it's something we really want to expand, because I think, again, just building an understanding of the opportunity there and being proximate, as you were saying about proximity, is so important in these moments. How can you build that proximity in a way that really helps you understand someone else's experience in a more real way than you can then authentically carry forward, versus like trying to imagine it, I think can be so hard.
Yeah. The idea of walking in somebody's shoes and really sitting down and understanding what that actually means versus assuming that you're going to be able to piece it together on your own, because you aren't going to be able to a lot of the times. I love that. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I love that you're investing. And I'm sure that's part of why you came on here today, and having your voice being heard in this context is really powerful. So I'm grateful. I've just got one last question. It's a question that I consistently ask everybody that comes on. If you could time travel and go back and tell like a 10-year-old Ruth one piece of advice, what would that be?
Oh, man. I would probably tell her that, like, to worry less, to go for it more. Just know, to believe in myself a little bit more than I did at the time, and be okay with the unknowns. I think I crave things to be known and concrete. I don't like feeling comfortable. And it's like, just be okay with that a bit more, and take a bit more risk.
I love that. And I can relate so much. So I have loved having you on. This has been so fun. I think, anybody who listens to this is going to learn something. So Ruth, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and review on the platform you're listening on. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you have feedback or suggestions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us at podcasts@caylent.com. And you can find the email address in the description below. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.